So I gave y'all a BRICS introduction beginner's guide video and y'all gave me my life. Okay. I just want to say that I was not expecting the response back from that video, which I think has almost 90,000 views in less than a month. I simply wanted to do my own research and had been holding on to that video for a couple of months and was hesitant to put it out there because I just knew like most people know about this and why would they listen to me about this? And I'm here to tell you, if you have a goal and you want to do a thing, do the thing. Don't let your own self-doubt stop you from doing the thing. Believe it or not, it is still a thing that I deal with in sharing content and being versatile and making sure that I'm providing content that is valuable. I just want to say thank you to all of the people that liked that content, that shared it with someone, that found it valuable. You helped me to really self-actualize in an entirely different way, to be able to deliver economic information in a way that I've always wanted to. I always have looked at myself as an economist, but it wasn't something that I really thought I could do because we most of the time see only white men economists, right? We don't see Black women. So it's really been a beautiful experience to see that video get so much positive response and for people to find value in it. So thank you to everyone who watched that video, who is here and subscribed to the channel because of that video. Welcome back and welcome to the channel. On my channel, Ashley in Africa, I talk about my experience living, moving, and doing business here on the continent of Africa. I am the creator of Africa Investors Academy. I teach professionals, entrepreneurs, and aspiring entrepreneurs how to start a business, expand a business, and invest in assets and projects to help them retire early. And if that sounds interesting to you, please be sure to subscribe. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel, hit notifications so you'll get access to information as I post it, and share it with someone who would find value in it. And thank you to all of our subscribers as we're growing. I'm so grateful for the community that is growing here, the positive feedback. It's been beautiful, and transparently being here on the ground in this country, in Tanzania, seeing the opportunity, seeing the growth that is happening here on the continent. When I started to explore different alliances, economic alliances, I wanted to know how they were going to create the future of South Africa, of this continent of Africa, as I am invested in these countries, as I am, I'm bought in. Like I moved myself and my two girls here 2 years ago. We have businesses here in Tanzania and South Africa. And I wanted to learn more about the regulatory environment. I wanted to learn more about the policies that were happening that were going to affect me and my investment. And BRICS happens to be the economic juggernaut that seems to be making the most progress globally and, economically here on the continent. And so in this video, I'm going to give you some updates. I highly suggest that you stay in this algorithm and you get more information and do additional research because things are moving quickly in this BRICS economic alliance that has essentially become BRICS plus. So we'll get into that. And if you have an interest in getting involved in figuring out how you can best leverage your income, your investments, I will tell you how you can get involved. Stay till the end, and I'll tell you a little bit more about some ways that you can get involved to, diversify your investments. So, as a reminder, BRICS is an economic alliance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It is really being called BRICS Plus as several nations are actively joining and expressing interest into this economic alliance. So BRICS Plus is and represents 25%. So some of the statistics show 20, 21. So you'll see anywhere from 20 to 26% of the global GDP. That is huge. And 40%, anywhere from 35 to 41% of the world's population. And there are a couple things that I want to say even about these numbers, right? Being here in Tanzania, this is one of the fastest growing, as Dar es Salaam is one of the fastest growing populations in the world. There is still, and I was here for the census. I was here a few months ago when they did the countrywide census, and everybody doesn't participate in that, right? Like even with the most efficient processes, and I mean, I'm telling you, they came by my house at least 3 times to double check. But there are people in the rural villages, the rural parts of the bush that I'm sure are not getting counted. So when we're talking about 40% of the world's population, my eyes are that, you know, parts of the continent, even some of these companies, these countries that are joining, they still have underdeveloped populations, underdeveloped parts of their country that are not being counted in this population. And forgive the back noise, it's my water pump. Our Dada is here taking care of us, so you'll hear some background noise. But also as it pertains to the GDP, seeing the opportunity for growth, even just in infrastructure, even in just agriculture, manufacturing. These countries have literally barely scraped the surface of their economic output. And so while these numbers represent 25% and 40%, my hypothesis is that they're substantially higher than that. So let's just take that into consideration and recognize that this is a major economic conglomerate, essentially a waking giant. Okay, so some of the other countries that have expressed interest I mentioned in the previous video were Nigeria, Egypt, more recently Algeria. I've heard of Turkey, you know, expressing formal interest, but the biggest formal interest expressed that has been expressed, which is creating the most kind of shakeup globally, is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has expressed formal interest in joining the BRICS Plus nation. And this is a significant sign that the world is looking to move away from the Western dominance structure. So I'll speak a little bit about Saudi Arabia. Again, I am not a historian, but there has been an economic alliance between Saudi Arabia and the US for decades. The president, don't quote me, but I'll link a couple videos for you to do your own research below. The president that enacted this agreement essentially was providing US military defense to Saudi Arabia as one of, at the time, one of the world's highest producers of oil. And then in return for that military defense, Saudi Arabia supplied oil to America at, you know, specific pricing, creating what became the petrodollar agreement. Since then, the US has been doing its own thing, breaking the alliance in several ways. But with that, Saudi Arabia has says, okay, we're going to explore our options. And those options now include expressing interest, formal interest into this BRICS economic alliance. And so with that, they will also be seeking military defense from these BRICS these BRICS countries. And although I am not speaking about BRICS as a military alliance, we have to recognize that anytime there is an economic alliance, military is behind it. So I'll leave that there. So with that, Saudi Arabia is really bringing a lot of news to the table about this kind of formal expression. This is a huge shift in economic power And I'm surprised that it's still not really making Western news, but I'm not surprised because they do a really good job of keeping people's head in the sand and, just totally oblivious to what is actually happening in the world. As long as they're consuming, as long as they're spending money, the US is happy. So let's get into some of these sanctions. And so, as we know, there is a war happening in in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine. And months ago, when the US imposed sanctions on Russia, we heard about McDonald's pulling out and Visa and MasterCard, canceling cards and things like that. You had about a dozen Western countries that also imposed these sanctions, making it hard for Russians to cross the border into their countries. That was a dozen countries. There are over 140 countries that didn't impose these sanctions. And so while they will have you believing that the Russian economy is like crashed, the reality is that isn't true. I'd say I was even in South Africa a couple months ago, and they were looking to hire some South African artists to perform at a festival in Russia. I'm not saying it's all good, but I am saying that Russia's a massive country and they're still actively doing business. And as far as the BRICS countries go, they never said anything. They never imposed any sanctions. They didn't say it loudly, but they said it with their power, with their economic influence, and they did nothing. And so let's look at what these 14 countries that did, or a dozen countries that did impose sanctions, they represent about 1.5 billion people. The other 140 countries that did nothing, that kind of just stayed neutral or just stayed out of it, they represent 6.5 billion people. So they're looking, this is a positive trend towards the BRICS alliance. And, a Russian academic wrote that this was a sign of what happens when you get out of line with the US. And so not only was it actually a thing that happened, it is something that other countries took note of. Like, oh, okay, so when you don't fall in line with what US wants you to do, they will threaten to crumble your economy. And there was a moment in what I believe is parliament, I'm not sure if that's the correct term, in South Africa. A South African legislator had a very bold statement to make to an American official saying, we are friends and we value our relationship with you, but we will not be bullied into doing what you want us to do, essentially, is what she said. And that, had to do with denouncing the relationship between Russia and South Africa. And so, yeah, I mean, these things are actively happening. They're taking form, and it's a bit fuzzy, but it's showing to be an alliance that, is they're standing firm in their relationship, and they are a better prepared group than any other, individual economic alliance. And I'd say even the Western countries, right? Look at what's happening in the EU and the UK, to the price of the dollar, to these other countries that have this Western influence, right? They're not doing so well. And so, yes, things are going to get harder and worse before they get better. But, let's just pay attention to what is happening. Moscow and Beijing, the major metropolitan cities in Russia and China, they are seeking a reconstruction of the world order. And as some of the biggest consumers of oil in the world, these strategic alliances are helping them. They've got now the biggest backing of oil creators in the world, with Saudi Arabia, with Nigeria, with Russia, and some of these untapped countries in Africa that have oil that aren't talking about it yet. So yeah, this is a very powerful alliance. And, essentially it's like the West versus the world. And listen, We all know the US has a history of not taking things lightly when it comes to standing against the US and the American way. And so no one is assuming that they're just going to take this laying down, right? No one is assuming that, not even me. Um, but they have made threats to Saudi Arabia, saying that there will be consequences for cutting their production to the U.S. And in creating instability among the pricing of the barrel of oils and all of the inflation that we're seeing in the price of oil. But let's be clear. The inflation that has been created in the US has been created by the US. It has not been created by these foreign countries, which they would like you to believe the war, in the Ukraine and the oil prices. No. Inflation is created by frivolous government spending. And the US has put themselves in this position while they are trying to threaten other countries to get in line. And, Saudi Arabia is calling their bluff, as is China. They've threatened to weaken the security for Saudi Arabia from Iran, saying that they're going to, pull back some of their security. And so Saudi Arabia is said to have been, creating these defense agreements with Russia and China. And so it's said that the US is preparing economically, they're preparing defensively. They are also, preparing socially and politically, economically, and defensively, right? And there was a statement that was pulled from the 68th NATO defense, the 68th NATO conference, annual session of the NATO conference in the Parliamentary Assembly, from a General Jess Stoltenberg, saying that, I quote, "What we are doing in Ukraine is just the beginning. We are preparing for the big one." What is the big one? Nobody knows. And there has said to been a response by China saying the US should alter their course or face an inevitable conflict. And so, yeah, I mean, politics. They say war is politics with violence. And economics is war without violence. Both are seeming to happen right now. And, who knows? Again, continue to do your research. But what we know is that when things change, people often don't deal with change very well. And it seems like BRICS is here to stay. BRICS Plus is growing, and the US is, they're trying to remain in their spot. And I wouldn't even say they're in the number one spot. They've tried to convince much of the world that they are, but the curtain and the veil has been pulled back. I'd say let's close this out with some positivity. There has been talks about a BRICS currency. So I believe Putin even announced that there would be this BRICS currency, between China, India, and Russia. Some people have, projected that this will be a digital currency. We'll get into that in a moment. But essentially, this currency will be a reevaluation of gold. And, I've seen some people in the comments saying that US, is one of the largest owners of gold. And that is just completely inaccurate. Over the last couple of years, foreign entities have been taking back their gold at like crazy rates. And you've got family offices buying gold. You've got these unknown entities that are like not even named, that are not even regulated, that are like sitting on offshore accounts, buying up absorbent amounts of gold. And so the US is not the number one holder of gold. And then let's get into the continent of Africa and how there is the most unmined gold in the world here on this continent. So yes, this is said to be a reevaluation of the gold asset, but digital assets are absolutely here to stay. I know that if you're invested in crypto, we're all taking a hit, me included. There are going to be these highs and lows, removing some of these, bad guys and bad players that did actually capitalize off of the boom of crypto. But digital assets are absolutely here to stay. It is something around the innovation of regulation that these countries like, right? Russia, China, South Africa, the highest adopted, use of crypto in the world, outside of the US. And so these are assets that are here to stay, and we'll continue to pay attention to them. XRP is something that is being said to pay attention to, but this is not financial advice. Absolutely do your own research. But guys, if you're interested in this type of content, pay attention. I'll link a couple of other creators below. There are some Americans that are creating this content. I haven't seen any Black folks creating this content, so I'm happy that I'm able to share content to a community that typically wouldn't get access to it or wouldn't find it in their algorithms. So if you have an interest in getting more involved, being interested in how you can leverage your investment portfolio, getting diversified, please learn more about Africa Investors Academy. I will leave the link below in the description. You can visit ashleyinafrika.com/Africa Investors Academy. We are a community of entrepreneurs, strategists, advisors. We get access to Africa news, world news as it affects the African continent, deal flow, investment opportunities, advisement from attorneys and strategists on different policies as it pertains to foreign investors. And I'm so excited. We're growing. The community is growing. And if you have an interest in getting involved, please join us over there on the Discord. But if you found this content valuable, please be sure to like it, share it with someone else who would find value in it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to get updates when I post new content like this next. So until the next video, I'll see you soon.